started here. Again, thank you so much for being with Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness for our Lunch with the Friends programs. I'm Chris Knopp, Executive Director of the Friends, and I have with me Max Kiley, our Legal Director and General Counsel. We have a great program today talking about a huge threat to Minnesota's clean water, PolyMet and PolyMet-Teck. PolyMet and Teck make Minnesota's next potential mega-polluter on our radar screen now. For over 50 years, Friends of the Boundary Waters has been the leading organization for protecting the boundary waters. Today, our work consists of 3 pillars: wilderness, people, and community. For the wilderness, we're advocates for protecting the wilderness. For people, our No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters programs connects Minnesota students all across the state to the boundary waters. And finally, for community, through our Thriving Communities program, we have an office in Ely to support those communities in Ely and all throughout the gateway communities to the boundary waters. Today's program is focused on that first pillar, protecting the wilderness. And I'll give a little plug for an event that we have coming up before we get into the meat of this. On Tuesday, April 4th, we're having Prove It First Day at the Capitol, where we're going to be lobbying our legislators to support Prove It First, which would require the sulfide mining companies to first prove that it's been done safely elsewhere before it's done in Minnesota. And so we'll be meeting with legislators all day on April 4th. And in the chat button at the bottom or top of your screen there, you'll have the contact information for our colleague Maggie Morin, who can sign you up for Prove It First Day. So we'll have a lot of fun on Prove It First Day, and we'll culminate with a celebration and rally at the Rotunda from 2 to 3 p.m. So please reach out to Maggie for Prove It First Day at the Capitol. So getting into the meat of it now, we have been battling PolyMet for over a decade now, and the culmination of nearly 5 years of litigation comes to a head next week with PolyMet Week with a contested case hearing. And my colleague, Max Kiley, our legal director and general counsel, will kind of walk through where we're at with PolyMet. And in the second half of the program, I'll talk about the PolyMet-Teck Mega-Polluter, the joint venture that threatens both the boundary waters and Lake Superior. So Max, take it away here.
Oh, good. Thank you very much, Chris. As Chris said, I'm Max Kiley. I'm legal director and general counsel here at the Friends. And before we discuss the contested case hearing, we think it's important to give a quick overview of the dangers of copper sulfide mining and some specifics about PolyMet. Here, just to get us situated geographically, what we're talking about here, you see on this slide, sulfide mining in Northeast Minnesota, 2 mines, 1 threat. In yellow, Twin Metals, it's right at the doorstep of the boundary waters, right near Birch Lake in the boundary waters watershed called the Rainy River watershed. About 12 miles to the southeast, the red dot on the map, you see PolyMet. That's a massive open pit mine in the Lake Superior watershed. Now, there are 2 proposed copper sulfide mines that are not shown on this map. One is the Teck Mesaba project, which Chris will talk about on the second half of the program. It's about a mile to the north east of PolyMet. And then in Aiken County in north central Minnesota, you have the Talon mine. So moving forward, so this is an aerial overview of the PolyMet site. It's located in an area known as the 100-Mile Swamp, which is a vast area of wetlands that form the headwaters to the Partridge and Embarrass rivers, which are major tributaries to the St. Louis River. And the St. Louis River, in turn, is a principal source of fresh water for Lake Superior. So this here is a picture of the wild rice in the Fond du Lac Reservation. And it's downstream from PolyMet on the St. Louis River. And the Fond du Lac Band relies on hunting, fishing, gathering, and wild ricing as a form of subsistence. And acid mine drainage and sulfate pollution, which I'll get into in a second, are toxic to both wild rice and other aquatic species. Now, what is sulfide mining? It refers to the properties of the rock that bear non-ferrous minerals such as copper. And sulfide-laden ores and the surrounding rock are reactive, which means that when they're exposed to air and water, that they create acid mine drainage. Now, if we can just very quickly, the difference between native copper and disseminated copper, quickly on the left, you see the, sort of a big glom of copper. And on the right is disseminated copper, and it's sort of ribboned throughout, ore. And both PolyMet and Twin Metals are focusing on disseminated copper. And the issue with that is, it's in order to be profitable, you have to pull out from the earth hundreds of millions of tons of disseminated copper, and you need to pulverize that. And the issue is, where do you put these hundreds of millions of tons of waste rock that is reactive, right? And just to give you some context for PolyMet, 0.4% of what they pull out of the earth is copper. The remainder is waste reactive rock. Now, acid mine drainage is precisely what makes copper sulfide mining so dangerous. If reactive rock is exposed to air or water, it creates acid mine drainage. So the struggle here is creating a manner of storage that prevents exposure to air and water. And this feat has never been accomplished. And this is precisely why the United States Environmental Protection Agency has labeled copper sulfide mining the most polluting industry in America. Now, about PolyMet's tailings basin, specifically here, it relies on something called the upstream method for construction. And it's the exact same method that was used in the Brumadinho mine that had a collapse in 2019. And effectively, the upstream method is prone to collapse because due to liquefaction, because what you're doing is you're taking wet, non-compacted tailings, right, that form the basis or the infrastructure upon which more dam lifts are built out of more non-compacted and wet tailings. And if you go to the next slide, Chris, this is a video here. Maybe we have to press play on the right there. Okay, yeah. And so this is what happened in Brazil in 2019, the exact same type of method of construction for the tailings dam that PolyMet intends to use. We're talking $7 to $8 billion in damage, and hundreds of people losing their life.
A gente sabe que a mina de feijão estava desativada desde 2015, mas o complexo ali, essas são imagens de equipamentos da Vale que foram cedidas. Você vê aí, foram cedidas, claro, pelas autoridades que estão investigando o desastre. Você vê aí esse braço, que parece ser um braço de um guindaste, que nós vimos na imagem anterior há pouco, na parte esquerda do vídeo, agora por outro ângulo. À medida em que a lama chega, você vê que há na parte direita pessoas trabalhando em carros.
And now imagine, right, PolyMet, like I said, it's at the headwaters of major tributaries to the St. Louis River, which then in turn feeds to Lake Superior. Imagine if there was a collapse of that magnitude, the amount and extent of water pollution would be, levels that we've never seen before. We're stopping PolyMet. Friends is on all fronts. And here I want to just give a quick shout out to Friends partners, Earth Justice, Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, the Fond du Lac Band, and Water Legacy. In the federal courts, Friends is trying to stop the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers from issuing Section 404 permit. It's effectively a wetlands destruction permit to PolyMet. Earth Justice represents Friends in those interests. On the state level, the MPCA has, issued air and wastewater permits to PolyMet. Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, the band, and Water Legacy have been doing fantastic work there, as well as in the federal court system. And with the DNR, it is issued a permit to mine and 2 dam safety permits. And we're going to talk about the permit to mine today, because that is the source of the contested case hearing. So how did we get here with respect to the permit to mine? In 2018, DNR issued an order granting PolyMet a permit to mine, and DNR likewise denied Friends' request for a contested case hearing. We challenged that in court. And in 2020, the Minnesota Court of Appeals reversed DNR's decision and required that the agency hold a contested case hearing on multiple permit to mine issues. That was appealed further to the Minnesota Supreme Court, which in 2021 only required a contested case hearing on the efficacy of the bentonite amendment with respect to DNR's reactive mine waste rule. And a contested case hearing is scheduled for next week. Now, you'll notice that some of these terms are underlined. We're going to try to go break down sort of what a contested case is for you here in just a very high level. So what is the Office of Administrative Hearings? The Office of Administrative Hearings is an executive branch agency responsible for presiding over challenges to state and local governmental action. So here, effectively, OAH is reviewing friends and friends, partners' challenge to the permit to mine. A contested case hearing is effectively an evidentiary trial, which is conducted by a judge, an administrative law judge. The administrative law judge then issues a report and recommendation to DNR, and DNR is responsible for issuing a final agency decision. The DNR's decision then may be appealed directly to the Minnesota Court of Appeals. It's important to note here that even if friends and friends partners can persuade the administrative law judge to the bentonite amendment that PolyMet proposes will not satisfy the reactive mine waste rule. Even though we win, the DNR can sort of modify or amend the administrative law judge's recommendation and ultimately conclude that the bentonite scheme is effective in preventing reactive or acid mine drainage. So what is PolyMet going to do with all of its mining waste? We're talking over 500 million in terms of tons of ore and waste rock. Again, as I said, only 0.4% of that is copper. And the rest is just hundreds of millions of tons of crushed tailings that are turned into a slurry by mixing with water and pumped to an existing and unlined tailings dam. PolyMet will use the upstream method that I discussed earlier, and PolyMet is required to satisfy DNR's reactive mine waste rule. So what is DNR's reactive mine waste rule? Now, it requires that a mining site be reclaimed or restored back to its original condition as much as possible. And the reactive mine waste rule is satisfied by either requiring a mine to modify the waste such the waste is no longer reactive, or requiring a mine to permanently prevent substantially all water from moving through or over the mine waste and provide for collection and disposal of any remaining residual waters that drain from the mine waste. So effectively what PolyMet is doing is using bentonite, which is a natural clay sealant, and I'll get into that in a second. And using that bentonite amendment as a mechanism to prevent air and water from flowing over the waste rock. As I said, so we've covered this slide. And, we are now at Chris's section of the presentation. Should we do question and answer now for mine, or wait, save them all for the end?
Yeah, we'll save it. We'll save it for the end. So we're gonna move the computer screen over here, everyone, for the second half of the program here. And so this is birth of a Mega-Polluter. So what Max so well outlined here is the threat from PolyMet and how we're trying to challenge that. Well, last summer, it's sort of like two villains in a movie coming together. PolyMet announced that it was entering a joint venture with another company called Teck. So PolyMet is a Canadian company owned by the Swiss-based Glencore that has a notorious environmental record around the globe. Teck is a Canadian company that also has a notorious environmental record as well. So they announced that they were coming together to join forces. And this map illustrates the proximity of those. So that that North Shore mining site, roughly there, that's PolyMet. So that or just below that, you can see where PolyMet is located in the red there, and the yellow over there, that's the Teck site. And this map over here will kind of illustrate this as well. So there are two watersheds involved here. As Max explained, the PolyMet, which is depicted in the red here, flows to the south into the St. Louis River watershed, into Lake Superior, the greatest of the Great Lakes and the largest freshwater lake in the world. To the north there is the Rainy River watershed that flows into the boundary waters. So you can see where Teck straddles the watersheds there. So this is where PolyMet and Teck coming together as a joint venture has the dubious distinction of polluting both these watersheds. So why would PolyMet and Teck come together? Well, it's pretty simple. Teck has a larger potential mineral reserve for copper than PolyMet. And what PolyMet has to offer is the processing facility. So this joint venture would create this Mega-Polluter where ore from the Teck site would be processed over at the PolyMet site. So this is where the two villains come together here, so to speak, to create this Mega-Polluter. And this gets a little complicated, but this is a way of kind of helping you understand the breadcrumbs that we're trying to follow here. So PolyMet has that North Met mine, and PolyMet, all one word, is a parent company. And then over on the right hand of your screen is this Teck Resources. That's also another parent company, and its proposed mine is called the Mesaba mine. And so following that flow diagram on the left-hand side, there's a subsidiary called PolyMet, two words. And then over on the right-hand side, you'll see Teck America. That's the other subsidiary. Well, here's what's happened here. We're trying to follow the breadcrumbs as we can. So we're trying to provide this to you in almost real time here. PolyMet, with the subsidiary with two words there, it changes name and created this to New Range. That's where you see the joint venture there. Well, this PolyMet USA, this new subsidiary, and this Teck America subsidiary, they're 50% owners of this joint venture here. They're called members of this joint venture. So I know it's a lot of words here, but there's like two basic things to remember here: that this is PolyMet and Teck coming together to form a new venture called New Range, and that they're 50% owners of this joint venture. And so under this agreement that was announced last summer, that we got through a Freedom of Information Act request, that the transfer of all leases and permits had to go to the joint venture, that New Range company, that before it was to close. And so we were working hard behind the scenes in the fall and early winter here, trying to figure out what's really going on here. Like what's up with all these leases and permits. And so to that end, we submitted a Freedom of Information Act request in November, trying to figure out, hey, what's going on here? What's going on here? And here's what we got back here. So one of the leases with respect to Teck, that joint venture, Teck has leases on state and private land. And so even though it's within the Rainy River watershed, that federal moratorium that the Biden administration imposed in January only applies to federal land. It does not apply to private or state land. So the Teck mineral leases can go forward irrespective of what the Biden administration did, even though it's in the Rainy River watershed, polluting the boundary waters, as well as the potential to pollute Lake Superior. So one of those leases here has this language here, and it's a block move right from this Teck mineral lease. And so the commissioner of DNR has discretionary authority to consider these criteria. And I know it may seem like some legal mumbo jumbo, but here's basically what it provides is that in order for those leases to be assigned to a new entity, the DNR commissioner can consider these various factors like which basically go to does that new entity to which the leases would be assigned, does it have the financial wherewithal, the business wherewithal, and the moral wherewithal? Do they comply with environmental laws in order for as a discretionary factor for the commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources to consider before approving assignment of those leases? So it's right there in the lease language where the DNR commissioner could prevent that if it felt like after considering these factors that those leases could not that she would not approve assignment of those leases. And from our perspective, we thought, boy, this might be a way of preventing the joint venture from going forward. And so we submitted another Freedom of Information Act request, trying to get some more information here. We did this one. It's kind of a New Year's project in early January here. And so while we were trying to get information here, kind of a Valentine's Day surprise here, there was an announcement that PolyMet-Teck had finalized the joint venture. And we were really trying to work with legislators to see if legislators could meet with the DNR commissioner to sort of find out, hey, what's going on here. That meeting did not happen. And so we were as we were scrambling here trying to find information, this announcement happened, and we were wondering, boy, were those leases and permits assigned to this joint venture entity? And so to that end, I sent a letter to DNR Commissioner Sarah Stroman asking, like, hey, what's up here? Were these leases assigned here? We received a response back from DNR 2 weeks later on March 3rd here. And I want to, in this letter, we've highlighted a key sentence here. So the question that we posed was, did you as DNR Commissioner approve assignment of the 2001 mineral lease? That's the lease language that we showed there, from Cominco to Teck or to the PolyMet-Teck Joint Venture. So that's that lease that has that language that provides the DNR commissioner with discretionary authority to consider various factors and not assign those mineral leases to the new joint venture. And so the response was here, as highlighted, there have been no recent changes or requests for assignment of these leases. So that's one response. But we also got a Freedom of Information Act request at the same around the same time here. And here we have correspondence from Teck to an attorney at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, in which the Teck official is asking very explicitly, we would like to meet with you to discuss the best path forward, obtaining consent to transfer and or approve the assignment of these leases. And so kind of going,
and that's October of 2022.
Yeah,
right? It's late October 2022. So recently.
So very recently. So this happened in October, and kind of, going back here, you can see in this letter that we received on March 3rd is that there have been no recent changes or requests for assignment of these leases. But going back here, this October 28th, 2022 email explicitly contradicts that. And so this is what we've gotten back from DNR, this contradiction between this. Again, we would like to meet with you to discuss the best path forward, but on the other hand, we have this. There have been no recent changes or requests for assignment, and so it may be that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing at DNR, but these are inconsistent. This letter is inconsistent with this Freedom of Information Act document that we have gotten. Furthermore, the DNR attorney responded in the first week of November to Teck, saying that I will say in advance that a joint venture cannot hold a state lease, saying that this corporate entity cannot hold a lease. but that there's we have an internal assignment processes for both state surface leases and mineral leases. And that our state mineral leases can be assigned without approval of the state executive council. So the state executive council is this a body with consisting of a number of top commissioners of various agencies. But the key thing is here, the attorney at DNR is saying, hey, that this joint venture cannot hold a mineral lease, that the way that legal corporate structure cannot. But then it continues in this other email that, hey, as a follow-up to our conversation last week, here are examples of where you can kind of get around this, that in order to get the mineral lease, you can't get it to the joint venture, but what you can do is basically, here are some ways to get around it, that you can send it to members of the joint venture. If you remember, and that's why that we have that flow diagram in that there are two members of this joint venture, that if you convey the mineral leases to both those members, then you can assign those leases. From what we know, that has not happened yet, but the question is, like, you know, whose side is DNR on? It's very confusing for us, but it's clear that what we have here is that there's a contradiction in the letter that we got back from DNR and the documents that we received from our State Freedom of Information Act request here. So it's a real you know, there are a lot of questions that are left unanswered.
And I'll just jump in there too and say that the both examples of lease assignment that DNR provided to Teck did not include those discretionary lease terms that Chris discussed previously.
It's exactly. And so, like, the sort of strategy for us is that if we could get DNR to consider those discretionary factors and not have that mineral lease conveyed to either the joint venture or the members of the joint venture, hey, maybe there's a way we could stop this joint venture from happening and in effect unwind the whole joint venture and stop PolyMet-Teck. And so there are some name games being played here. Here's another thing that's going on in parallel to this. And so we have all those legal actions going on here. And so PolyMet has set what looks like a really innocuous request, sort of saying, hey, we're no longer PolyMet. We're this company called New Range. Just add New Range to the lawsuits. So instead of PolyMet being involved in these lawsuits, just have New Range. Well, there are many problems with this, but I'll point out one very, very important one, that Teck, this company that's not been part of these lawsuits at all, could in fact become part of these lawsuits without having to show an interest in this case because of this name change. Because again, this New Range is PolyMet plus Teck. And so it has real implications in a legal sense, because you need what's called standing in a lawsuit. And this would be a way of giving Teck standing in these lawsuits when it hasn't shown that it has a real interest in it. And so this has come up, kind of getting back to our contested case hearing. This issue came up in the contested case hearing here, and in this, the administrative law judge had this exchange with the parties in it, and perhaps we've had a beneficial effect on DNR. But in this exchange between the administrative law judge Lefebvre here and DNR, DNR said that we believe that New Range should not become a party to the contested case hearing. They'd have to go through everything that we've been the regular process for becoming a permittee. So right now in the contested case hearing that begins next Monday, it's just PolyMet and not New Range. And so there are a whole lot of things going on here, and we are, you know, in kind of real time giving you what we know in this. We're trying to be the tip of the spear in defeating this PolyMet joint venture. And if we could kind of unravel all this, we could stop PolyMet as well, perhaps. And maybe I'll point out the business reason why. PolyMet is not profitable in and of itself. In order for it to be profitable, it needs another source of minerals, and that's what Teck provides. And if Teck can't provide those minerals to the bigger PolyMet, then PolyMet, is from a business perspective, can't go forward. So this is a way we can stop not just Teck, and not just we can also stop PolyMet as well. And so what to do? And as we're going forward here, we have sort of a legislative strategy that parallels our litigation strategy here. And I'll kind of get to that punchline because it really leads up to prove it first. And again, we have our legislative strategy. We have several pieces of legislation that work in tandem with our litigation strategy, but prove it first. That's state legislation that would stop PolyMet, it would stop Twin Metals, it would stop PolyMet-Teck, and it would stop the Tamarack mine as well. And again, that legislation simply requires these sulfide mining companies to first prove that it's been done safely elsewhere in the United States for a period of time, 10 years, and that the mine has been closed safely for a period of time, 10 years, without polluting. And if that demonstration of proof cannot be made, then we're not going to have Minnesota be the guinea pig. And so we're going to have Prove It First Day at the Capitol, beginning at 10 o'clock. You can meet with your legislators, and from 2 to 3, we'll have a rally at the Capitol. And then back at our offices at 5 o'clock, we'll have a gathering and celebration at our offices. So Prove It First Day. I'm going to turn to the chat function and Q&A buttons here. Looking at what we have here, some of the questions. And I know there was a question on whether Teck is Canadian or Chinese. It is in fact Canadian. The owner of the Talon mine, that is a Chinese company behind that. So as far as sort of the corporate ownership, these are companies. I think the main thing to take away from it is that whether it's PolyMet or Teck or Tamarack or Twin Metals, they're all owned by foreign. They're all foreign mining interests that do not have a vested interest in the long-term health of Minnesota citizens, in the long-term health of Minnesota's environment. So that's the key point there. And I'll see if there's some comments in the chat function here. We have some questions. Maybe I'll start with one here. How much influence can we have over DNR's decision on these mining leases? I think we can have a lot. Ultimately, DNR is responsive to the public, and we can provide science-based, legal-based arguments to influence DNR's decision. And I'll have Max. Why don't you expand on that point as well here?
Well, I don't know how much there is to add. I mean, on the front end, if people contact DNR and say, DNR, you should consider these discretionary factors, that might influence DNR to do so. On the back end, we have influence in the sense that we could conceivably challenge any DNR decision with respect to assignment. So really, it's just grassroots advocacy and talking to the DNR commissioner and saying, the purpose of these discretionary factors is to protect Minnesota, to protect Minnesota taxpayers, to make sure that leases are assigned to responsible corporate citizens, right? And you should do that. You should undertake that analysis.
Great. And I'm looking at some of these other questions in here in the chat. Please send us your questions here. And so the question has Teck already commenced mining? And the answer is no. That none of these mines have put a shovel in the ground. and through the legal work that we've done with our partners, the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, the Fond du Lac Band, Water Legacy, and Earth Justice, PolyMet cannot put a shovel in the ground. And through the work of the Biden administration, the Twin Metals mine also cannot put a shovel in the ground as well. So right now, we're these mines, we can prevent a problem from happening. It's sort of like this: we can prevent the train derailment from happening now, as opposed to after the disaster happens, everyone wants to come and come to the catastrophe. We want to prevent the catastrophe from happening now. And so we have a question here on the bentonite clay bed.
Yeah,
So
and the question is, what does PolyMet propose to do with the bentonite clay to prevent the acid pollution? And this is a very unsophisticated, high-level answer, but you know, the tailings basin, right, is going to be hundreds of millions of tons of reactive, rock, and effectively there's going to be a bentonite amendment that would, be applied over that. And then there would be a 900-acre pond that would exist after closure. And the hope is that, and I'll also note that there would be a subacutaneous, application of the bentonite. So, it'd have to be applied after the water's down. And the hope and the prayer is that, the bentonite would prevent air and water from the reactive mine waste to be prevent that from being exposed to air and water. DNR's own experts, own consultants have called this a Hail Mary, right? This is something that we believe there is evidence to show that the bentonite amendment is not a practical or workable solution to preventing this type of pollution.
great, thanks, Sir Max. We have a couple questions related to our strategy here, and one a couple of these questions go like whom to contact about all this. What I'll ask you ask of us for you is if you can make it to Prove It First Day at the Capitol on Tuesday, April 4th. That is a vehicle for applying public pressure, not just on the legislature, but also on the Walz administration and the Department of Natural Resources. And if you cannot make it to Prove It First Day at the Capitol, you can participate remotely. That is, by sending your name to Maggie Morin, who my colleague, who has her contact information in the chat in the chat function there. If you send Maggie an email, you can get the where you can send an email to your elected official, and that would, in the legislature, both your state representative and state senator, and that would be the best way for applying pressure. At the rally at the Capitol, we will be bringing a petition to Governor Walz's office of all the Minnesota citizens that have signed the petition supporting Prove It First. So at that rally at the Capitol, we in fact will be also putting pressure not just on the legislature, but also on the governor. And so where does it? There's a question, sort of. Well, where do things stand here right now with respect to Prove It First, the Prove It First legislation? Unfortunately, the leadership of the Republican Party and the DFL Party have prevented hearings on Prove It First. And so Prove It First does not have a hearing in either the Senate nor the House. So we have not been able to get hearings on this. That legislation is the primary sponsor in the Senate is Senator Jen McEwen from Duluth, and the primary sponsor in the House is Representative Jess Hansen from Burnsville. So those are the two primary sponsors of the Prove It First bill. And so again, Prove It First is kind of a vehicle for creating what's really a grassroots movement of people, passionate about the boundary waters, passionate about Lake Superior, and passionate about clean water throughout the state here. And so this is really an umbrella movement, again, from the grassroots for influencing public policy, both at the legislature and with the governor here. Going through some of these as well. Again, some of the question about again, where the governor stands on Prove It First. He is not a supporter of Prove It First, and by attending the rally at the Capitol on April 4th, or by sending an email to your elected official in the legislature, this is a way of putting pressure on Governor Walz here. So we share the concern that the governor has not come out supporting this. And what we will do we'll make if you contact Maggie here, we will provide you with the email contacts and phone number contacts for your legislators. And this is a good question, and this is a chance to talk about. We have not just a one bill that's part of our legislative strategy, but we have actually multiple strategies for our legislation. And so there's a comment here that DNR has two opposing functions that render it incapable of fully protecting Minnesota citizens. And so that's exactly right. So on one hand, Minnesota is charged with protecting Minnesota's environment. On the other hand, the Department of Natural Resources is also charged with promoting mining. And so that presents this conflict internally within DNR. So there's legislation that would end this conflict of interest at DNR and put the function of promoting mining in a Department of Development area at the state that would be more appropriate for that would allow greater independence for DNR to fulfill its function for protecting the environment. And that too, unfortunately, has not gotten any traction in the legislature as well. Looking at some of these comments here, and you want to respond to some of these here? Yeah. There was a question that asked about a larger legal strategy, or a strategy for bringing in other partners and other national organizations, and that is clearly our intent, and we're in discussions to try to do that. So that is a very good thought, and that's something we're pursuing right now to expand the coalition, if you would, to stop PolyMet-Teck here. And that question or comment raises an important point that in order to achieve the overall objective of protecting clean water and stopping sulfide mining, this is a broad effort that really no one organization and certainly no one individual will stop. That this is a coalition effort, and we have a Prove It First coalition that includes religious organizations, businesses, as well as environmental organizations. And so if you're part of a business or a faith-based organization or an environmental organization and you want them to join the Prove It First coalition, please contact Maggie here in the chat. We want to expand that coalition, and that Prove It First coalition includes a number of elected officials, but not enough now to make the difference at the Minnesota legislature now. And there's a comment here about Congressman Pete Stauber here, and yes, Congressman Pete Stauber is pro mining, and I think really the question to be asked is, how do we strengthen the communities of northeastern Minnesota? What are the concerns that make those communities strong? And clearly the need to have good paying jobs with health benefits is clearly important. But these mining companies are only at the most going to provide a couple hundred jobs that will be at the whims of international economics and can be shut down and open. And we see that right now. What happens with what's going on right now with Cleveland Cliffs and how they're using miners as a pawn in some larger economic battles here. And so so that's what we want to do the third pillar of our mission, to support thriving communities there. And that means a lot of different things. It means having strong schools that provide a good education for the students. It means having a broad-based economy where small businesses have access to capital. It means that there's ready access to health care. That just doesn't mean health insurance. It means having a doctor or dentist in town here. So those are the things that we hear, dealing with the opioid crisis. That's another important effort to strengthen these communities. So really the question should be not just if you're, pro mining or pro clean water, but how you make it pro community and pro people. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's where Congressman Stauber's really failing his constituents, because he's not pro community. He's not addressing any of those real problems. He's just, tagging along on a campaign slogan or newspaper headline. Let's see. And this is there's some good comments here on a couple different things that maybe let's get into it. And that there is a law firm that has represented PolyMet's interest, and it is true that Governor Walz's chief of staff and another attorney in the governor's office worked for that law firm, and one of those attorneys that's now working in the governor's staff, in fact, represented PolyMet. So that is a true fact here. And if you're at a function where the governor's attending, ask him if that presents an issue here. It's an answer that we'd like to know the answer to as well.
Somebody asked, do we need to show up at the contested case hearing? And you don't have to by any means, but the public is welcome. It will be from 9:45 on Monday the 27th until 4 p.m. On Monday, and then each day it'll be from 9 to 4. There'll be an hour lunch break and breaks every hour and a half. It is located at the Revenue Building off of Robert Street, sort of across the street from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health building. And you're welcome to come. You don't have to come, but we will be doing a sort of an afterburn on Monday, a week from the 27th. It'll be a joint broadcast by Friends and MCEA, where we will go over sort of the developments that we've learned from the hearing. So if you can't make it there, that's fine, and we'll provide you with an update afterwards. Here's another question. Do you have any thoughts about how the contested hearing will turn out? How have the other lawsuits turned out? Timing for the final outcome of the contested hearing. In other words, how effective have the legal challenges been? Well, I'll say the legal challenges have been extraordinarily successful. I mean, right now, PolyMet does not have a permit, cannot put a shovel in the ground. PolyMet currently, it's really looking like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has rescinded the federal wetlands destruction permit. And it's likely that will, a decision is yet to be reached, but it's likely that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will completely rescind that permit. Likewise, we're waiting to hear back from the Minnesota Supreme Court with respect to the air pollution permit and the water pollution permit. And we have this permit to mine. Like I said earlier in my overview at the front half of the presentation, DNR ultimately gets to either accept or reject or modify the administrative law judge's report and recommendation. So it will be interesting to see where this ends up.
Great. We're going through the questions in the chat function here, and this is an interesting question, and I won't have maybe a full answer to it, but in part of the chat there's a little bit of the answer to this. Whether Canada is concerned about this, and a couple of years ago we made some initial outreach to the Canadian government and folks in Canada, and we really didn't get very far here. And this points to really maybe two things. One is that Canada is a country that is pro-extractive industry, and so we may have a certain perspective of Canada as being more strongly for the environment, stronger for the environment than the United States, but that's not necessarily the case here. And so there are a lot of extractive industry interest in Canada, and so Canada has not been an ally in the effort to stop this mine for that. And the second issue that commenting in the questions raised is that we are a small team here. We've grown in size significantly in the last several years here, but we try to focus our advocacy on where we think we can make the most difference. And so as we look at our litigation advocacy and our litigation legislative and advocacy strategies here, where can we make a difference? So we've been focusing on Minnesota. When we have an hour to spend, we've been trying to focus on Minnesota, and that's why the disappointment with the Minnesota legislature not moving on Prove It First is disappointing. Doesn't quite capture it, but really an abdication of responsibility that really comes from the leadership of both those parties, and so that's where the challenge is. I know we had a question with respect to Prove It First. Prove It First is introduced. I don't have the Senate file and House file numbers at the tip of my fingers as I'm speaking to you, but it has been introduced and has several co-sponsors as well. So it is legislation that can move should the leadership of the DFL and the leadership of the Republican Party wish it to move. And this is another question about are there journalists that can write about this? We have reached out to journalists, and that is part of the challenge with the fragmented media landscape here of trying to get our word out. We are in active communication, providing this information to journalists because the historic role of journalism is so important to shedding light onto darkness here. And so we encouraged the journalists either at the Star Tribune or Minnesota Public Radio or at the Minnesota Reformer or at any or other media out there to really look into this. And so we're doing what we can here, and we're hoping that members of the media will have listened to this program here and picked up some of the breadcrumbs on this. Great. This is part of the question of any suggestions for those who visit the Boundary Waters regularly but don't live in Minnesota. Well, the Boundary Waters is a national treasure, and so it is that this is not just an interest for Minnesota residents or Minnesota citizens. It's for residents of throughout. For all citizens of the United States and everyone who visits the Boundary Waters. And so I'll offer two things. One, if you would reach out to Maggie Morin here and say, we would like to express to Governor Walz that this is important to people nationally. We will send your communication on to Governor Walz on April 4th. And so that is a way of putting pressure at the state level where we think it could be most effective. And second, Congresswoman Betty McCollum has legislation to provide further protection for the Rainy River watershed that would protect the Boundary Waters. The Biden administration's actions are great. They last for 20 years. Congresswoman Betty McCollum's proposal would make that moratorium permanent and not just 20 years. Again, the limitation of that is that it just affects federal land, but that is in fact what can be done at the federal level. So, and so we can provide you with the link for where you can express support for Betty McCollum's federal legislation to your member of Congress or your U.S. Senator. And yes, we will provide you with information. Richard here. For communicating with DNR, and we'll provide that for everyone else as well. So, well, I know we're kind of coming up on our time here. Let's see if we can answer maybe. Yes, exactly. There are other fine journalists, Stephanie Hemphill and Aaron Brown here for sure. They cover this and. Great. Well, we are essentially as an organization, we're really an extension of all of you here at the staff, and we never forget how fortunate we are to be able to help represent you as staff members of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. The strength of our organization is really all of you. We're a people-based organization. We're a grassroots organization. We've been that since 1976, and you are the strength of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. So feel free to reach out to Maggie Morin here. Her email's there in the chat. You can also reach out to me. Again, I'm Chris Knopp, and I'll give you my cell phone number. My cell phone is 651-999. 9565. Again, 651-999-9565. And do not hesitate to call me. I work for our board of directors and for all of you, our members and supporters and everyone who loves the Boundary Water. So I view it as my obligation to take your calls and to respond to you. So thank you. So have a great afternoon. We've provided you with the breadcrumbs we know on PolyMet-Teck and PolyMet Week. Max will be busy next week.
Yep. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye there.